Going to push all of the ammunition we have out, and you're going to go into the fight. And, well, we had M14s in those days, and we did not travel with any ammunition. But we had ammunition in the airplane. It was all in crates. So we break the crates out, and we're trying, it's all linked, M60 ammunition. So we are tearing the rounds off and trying to pump them into our, and I think by the time they landed, we had about 10 rounds per person. And I'm looking out these little porthole windows, and I can see all this smoke coming up, and then we have the Cobra gunships going down the side, and I said, oh, this is tremendous.
That was a major attack.
Yeah, it was a
major attack.
Yeah, it was a major attack, all right. We do exactly what he said, run down the runway, spin around, doors open, we push everything out, and we come filing out, running out, hit the ground, and there are all these guys standing around Air Force in shorts. Some of them are holding a beer. They're looking at these idiots, and I'm on the ground, and I've got, my weapon out, etc. That was my introduction to Vietnam, and I had 44 young kids.
It's not a good day when the Air Force is laughing at you. That's not a good day.
As it turned out, the fires that I saw were charcoal fires. The gunships that I saw outside, they were coming back to refuel. And so, you learn the hard way sometimes in life.
Tell us about the first time, all this great training and infantry training, and you're out in your first time in combat.
Well, I would tell you that, and I can only speak for myself,
Sure.
because everybody's experience is totally different. And as I said, it probably shows I'm not movie material. Because first time I captured the first North Vietnamese soldier that the 25th had. Ran into him along a stream bed to the northwest of Pleiku. He indicated that there was a North Vietnamese battalion in the area. So rest of the company came in, and that night we were mortared, and the next morning Bob Lentz and his platoon were sent to see if they could figure out where the mortars came from. And he followed the stream bed down the stream, or down the thing looking for the mortar site, and ran right into that battalion. We'll make a long story short, they got chopped up pretty badly. Next platoon went in, got chopped up. And then I went in, and the words you never want to hear from your company commander is, Kelsey, you're all I've got left. And so he wanted me to flank the North Vietnamese who were just to the north of us along the riverbank. And I moved over to the river, and again, I was Benning school. Benning taught you certain ways, and you tried to inculcate that into your brain. There's a log across the river that the North Vietnamese used all the time. And so I immediately remembered that you don't cross single file across a log that's under fire. You'll lose everybody. So I said, jump into the river, we'll cross that way. First two guys jumped in the river, disappeared. We spent 10 minutes trying to haul our rear ends out of the river, and then we crossed the log single file and moved down opposite. And then the North Vietnamese took us under fire. And as I've said to thousands of officers over the years, you learn real quickly that everything has an order, and whatever you do as an officer, it starts from your decision making on the first order. When you are under fire, you have a number of things that you have to do. One of which is you have to inform your boss what's going on. Another thing is you have to give orders to your people on what you want them to do. Third thing is that you want to use whatever assets you have to bring fire on the enemy. Fourth thing is you want to make sure that those people that you have that have been engaged and wounded or killed are taken care of. And fifth thing is you want to take care of yourself because you're being fired on also. What's the first thing you do? Because everything you do from there cascades down. If you contact your boss, then you haven't taken care of the guys that have been wounded. If you take care of the guys that have been wounded, you haven't contacted your boss, you haven't called in support fires. If you call in support fires first and somebody's shooting at you, you may get wounded. You may be the next person. Which one of those things do you do first? I did all of them badly in the first fight. And I would say to most junior officers, that's what happens. It's so loud. It's so overwhelming. You have people screaming. All of these things that you have, it's a 360-degree war. It's not on the movie screen. It's not where I can look away and there is no war. Or I can turn the sound volume down. And then you have your own people hurt. And then you have somebody that's trying to kill you. Intelligence, that's our job, is to find out who would have provided the information. We put a team together. We had 320,000 suspects in 1982. I was very fortunate enough to be commanding the brigade back in Germany in 1988 when the German counterintelligence organization, with our assistance, broke into a house and put a 9mm pistol upside the head of an Army Master Sergeant. We went from 320,000 to 1 in 6 years.
He was our own guy?
He was our own guy. Actually, he had several other people, our own people, working with it.
For money?
For money. Most my experience, gentlemen, is that most people commit espionage against this country for money. Most people that we recruit for espionage to help us do it for other reasons. They do it for love of their family mostly. They want to have a better life for their family, or unhappiness with the regime that they're currently occupying. But most Americans who commit espionage against this country do it for money.
A fellow by the name of Ames, which I think you're
Aldrich
familiar
Ames
with.
was a classic example, a CIA, senior CIA man. And I had some experience with Aldrich Ames when he was in Italy. I can't speak a lot of that, but I can tell you that the rules are that we in the Army and in the military conduct no intelligence operations that are not cleared with our National Intelligence Organization. We're not rogues. We don't go off on our own. It would be nice to do it at times, I think, but we don't. We clear it through proper channels. And so we had to brief all of those human operations that we conducted, and we did a number of those. And Aldrich Ames was in the briefing scheme of things at the time, and we sent a number of people east to work for the United States, have been properly vetted. These were all foreigners. These were not, when I say foreigners, these were not U.S. citizens as we would know. These were people we had recruited and asked them to go provide viable intelligence back to us, and none of them ever returned.
And Aldrich Ames was the guy who
Aldrich
compromised.
Ames was knowledgeable on all of them, and it was part later on of
One of my-
all that he turned over.
One of my classmates at the Kennedy School was a CIA employee, and he spent the last couple of years of his tour with the CIA trying to uncover all the damage that Aldrich Ames had done, which was considerable.
He just think of it this way: if you have somebody in the hen house, you're in pretty good shape. Okay, if you're the fox already in the hen house, more than likely you can get all the chickens, and that's what they have.
Into conflict. And Clovis, welcome to our show.
Well, thank you very much. It's my honor to be here.
Well, it's our honor having you. We've been trying to get you here for a month or so now, and the schedule finally worked out. We have with us here by Clovis a book, Since You Asked, and Clovis was just honored with other veterans at our annual book signing event for the Veterans Heritage Project. Students interview veterans, copy edit the stories go into books, and the books go to the Library of Congress, and they go to a veteran, and this is Clovis's book, and I have one that he autographed for us as well. So Clovis, you started off in Georgia.
Yes.
And how did you get in the Army? You were involved in the Civil Rights Movement in high school as well.
Yes. My hometown is Dawson, Georgia, about 23 miles northwest of Albany. And while I was in high school, there was the Albany movement with Dr. King speaking and students protesting, mainly for Black Americans just to have the rights everybody else had.
Sure. What year was this, Clovis?
That was, I graduated in 63, so 62, 63.
Very early on in that movement.
Yes, yes. And that was before Selma.
Yeah.
Of course, you had recently the movie Selma come out, but
Sure.
the Albany movement was prior to Selma. And I would go down every night I could and listen to Dr. King speak. It was, sometimes I got a ride down, and sometimes I would catch the bus back. And that was a curfew at that time, so it's like I would get to the bus station, and if no police were around, I would just, I would find my way back home, walking through neighborhoods where you didn't have a lot of dogs to bark. So,
Oh, gosh.
so anyway, but as a young black person growing up in that part of the world, that was strict segregation and really kind of a reign of terror at that time.
And that was in our lifetime. And
That wasn't kind of a reign of terror. That was a reign of terror.
Yeah, it was. In fact, yes, it was. Because you had, in my hometown, you had people shot, you had people killed, you had people who were hung, and nothing was ever done about it.
And yet you still wanted to join the military and fight for the country.
Well, yes. Thing is, I saw myself as a citizen of the country, as an American. And I had cousins who had been in World War II. And, when you're in a place where there's really oppression, and you hear these stories about people going to foreign lands and experiences they had and how things were different, how life was different, how black people were treated in different parts of the world. So, well, hey, there's a better world than I'm living in.
You had to
And
go
I
to
wanted
war
to find it.
You had to go to war to get freedom.
Well, in a way, yes.
Isn't that something?
Because you look at the situation there at the time in my hometown, it was called Terrible Terrell County because of the way the black people were treated. That was the nickname for my home county. I knew that there were more opportunities elsewhere because we had teachers who wound up with their PhDs because they couldn't go to a southern school, but the state would pay for their education to go to a northern school, and they needed to get certain credits in order to maintain their teaching credentials. So you had these educators going away during the summer to go study in northern universities and getting their masters and PhDs. So
You had a great education.
yeah, I had a great education. But then, too, having a sense of fairness, when people are treated right and when they're treated wrong. And I just didn't like that.
And you protested in high school, too.
Oh, yeah, protesting in high school. The student population of my county was right at about 67% black student population. And I found out how the money was allocated for the maintenance and operation of the schools. I wrote a letter to the superintendent of schools demanding, not asking, demanding an accounting of the money for the maintenance and operation of schools because we had secondhand books. We had to make desks, for students to use in the typing class, perform janitorial service, perform the landscaping, all of that. Students did. I'm thinking something is wrong. You pass by the white schools, they've got gyms, they've got, all the modern stuff. Something is wrong with this picture. And to me, it was always about fairness and equality. So so knowing the formula, I said, wait a minute, we should at least be getting 2/3 of the money. and so I wrote this letter, and the next day the sheriff shows up.
The sheriff.
Yeah. And he, I guess, takes me into custody. He tells me to get in the car because he berates me in front of the students who were looking. He called me a knothead. He says, well, we built y'all a brand new school building. And we had a new school building. It was Carver High School. And I quipped back saying, well, brick and mortar does not constitute a proper education. Well, that didn't go over too well. he got a little peeved, and he says, and I'm quoting him. He says, "Y'all are our niggas. We brought you here. We clothed you. We fed you. Y'all belong to us. You do what we say do." And that was his attitude. And I got put in the back of his car and taken downtown. And the saving grace for me is that he knew my father, and he respected my father. He said, something is not right about this.
He said that.
Yeah. He says, I was told to come and arrest you. He said, but I'm not going to arrest you. I want you to go down where your father worked. My father worked at the local rail yard. He said, because I know your father raised you right. He said, something about this just isn't right. He says, you tell your father, he said, you tell your daddy what happened, and after that, you go home, and you go to school tomorrow. He said, I have instructions to arrest you, but something just isn't right about this, because I know your father, and I know he wouldn't allow you to, he wouldn't raise you to go out and do something that, if you didn't have a real good reason for doing it. So I went home, went to school the next day, and I was put out of all the organizations of the school, was not allowed to talk to more than one student at a time. If there were 3 of us in conversation, I would be expelled. So that's how I spent my senior year.
This sounds like something from one of the countries where we now have troops.
Well,
You know, doesn't that sound pretty outrageous when you think about it? When we hear it now, it's not outrageous to you, but when you think about it, that it happened in our country, it's pretty.
well, the thing is, a lot of people justify how they mistreat other people, and they'll go to a lot of lengths to do that. And I've seen it here, I've seen it elsewhere.
Sure.
And yet, through all this process, your high school experience and that, you still decided that you were going to join the service and serve the country.
Well, yes, I'd wanted to be a pilot since I was 4 years old.
Okay.
And in the book, I think it's called Divine
A divine moment.
Divine Moment. And that was one of those divine moments. And the first, and the student who interviewed me came up with that phrase to capture my story. I was raised Baptist.
In the course of my 4 years in South Africa, I met with him on a number of occasions, generally in the company of our excellent ambassador who I was working for, Ambassador Princeton Lyman, just a real prince of a man who made a huge difference in terms of helping to bring about an end to apartheid. But he did a lot there, and we met together with Mandela on a couple of occasions in Mandela's equivalent of the White House, and I signed an agreement right after Mandela came into office where basically it was the first U.S. South African government agreement after Mandela had taken office, and I just really privileged to work with Mandela and a number of other people. The future president, Thabo Mbeki, Joe Slovo, other people like that, Desmond Tutu, and we helped to fund some of these groups, and we funded Desmond Tutu and some of the U.S. aid. And she called up and said, Cap, you know, you must be getting tired of that job. How about a change? How about something a little exciting? And I said, well, what'd you have in mind? And she said, we want you to be the mayor of Baghdad. And I said, are we talking Baghdad, Arizona?
There's a lot of potholes there.
Or Baghdad, Iraq? She said, no, seriously, Baghdad, Iraq. And I went in to talk to my wife, and fully expecting her to say, not a chance, not going to happen. And she said, hey, you've been working towards this all your life. It's development, it's management. They need somebody with experience. They need somebody with a little bit of a military background. You've got all that. Take the job, go for it.
And
So-
what year was this, Cap?
This was just before Christmas of 2003. We'd gone in, as our listeners will remember, in March of 2003, and we'd already had one mayor out there and another fellow for a shorter time. But basically, they had been the first 2 mayors out there, and I was coming in as the 3rd one. So I arrived out there in January of 2004, and I had received a job description from my predecessor.
Who was that now?
That was Ted Morris, truly in U.S. aid circles, a legend in his own time. He doesn't like me to say that, but it's very much the case. He has some fantastic stories about his experiences and travels around the world. But he had sent me a job description, which basically said, you know, you're the de facto mayor, the de facto governor, and here's what your job is. And I took it with a grain of salt. I said, you know, this really isn't the job. It's going to be much less than this. And I got there, and after about 2 days of briefings, I swallowed hard and said, my gosh, I really am the mayor. I really am the governor. Have I bitten off more than I can chew? And I had a couple of sleepless nights.
And you were working closely with the military. You had to be working hand in glove with the military. Who was your military counterpart?
Well, my military counterpart, the first time I came in, initially when I came in, was Brigadier General Marty Dempsey. And he, of course, is now our Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff. But he got his second star while he was there, but we worked very closely together. General Dempsey had the military administration of Baghdad, while I had the civilian administration of Baghdad. We met very, very closely.
Now, were the Ba'athist people working with you at that time? Were the former administrators, government officials of Baghdad now working in cooperation with your guidance and your staff at that point in time?
The famous, or more accurately, the infamous decision to go through the de-Baathification process had already taken place. And everybody with the Ba'athist political party, Saddam's party, had been removed from the government. Now, unfortunately, this meant that everybody from kindergarten teachers all the way up through Saddam Hussein's highest political advisors were out. And teachers and nurses and other people. And it took us a while to correct that
So that was,
huge error.
you would have to say that was not that was a mistake move on the U.S. part, was it not?
It was a huge mistake.
And everybody knew it, as you were saying earlier at the break, that
Yeah.
the military and the people in Iraq knew it at the time. That was not the path that we should have been following.
Absolutely. Two major mistakes which we made there, and it's easy to see this looking back, but one was the de-Baathification, and the other one was the demobilization of the Iraqi military.
Which we subsequently had to pay as sons of Iraq, right? We had to
That's
go back
right.
in and pay them off.
That's right.
We stopped paying them, they turned against us, and then Petraeus went in with a surge, right? But it was really, we started paying 100,000 troops, $100,000 former military members to fight
we
for us.
paid hundreds of millions of dollars out for Anbar province Sunnis to help set that situation straight.
We were reading one of our guests in preparation for Mr. Rothenberg, Daniel Rothenberg. It was reported that the amount of money, we spent $1.5 trillion on our war and efforts in Iraq, and that money would have been better spent had we taken it out and burned it. You know, isn't that an awful thing to have someone opine that, whether it's true or not, and told
I was too close to that to say,
Yeah.
yes, that's true.
But now the whole Middle East is upside down, and it's costing us $1 trillion more to fix what, you know, we spent $1 trillion. We should have burned it instead of the de-Baathification program and all of those other mistakes caused this fear that we're now paying for twice over, maybe.
Now I'm guessing that you're
With Major Schwarzkopf.
Well, I knew that, and I also, 3 weeks before the Ia Drang battle, I managed to get myself a helicopter buddy of mine flew me into Play Camp when it was besieged by one of those North Vietnamese regiments. And I made the acquaintance of a major named Charlie Beckwith. Who,
Oh, yeah, that guy.
Oh, yeah, that guy.
whose name rings bells, you know.
Yeah.
I got this Texas Aggie helicopter, Huey pilot. The airspace was closed because they had it surrounded with a dozen of those Chinese 51 caliber anti-aircraft machine guns on tripods.
Oh, man.
Like the guy
They had
said, you
shot
don't have to
down-
worry till you see the green tracers come through the fuselage. Well,
Oh, you're off to a bad start. They had shot down 2 fighter planes and 2 Hueys, and they closed the airspace. But I talked this guy into flying me in there, and I bailed off that helicopter, and they threw some wounded Montagnards aboard, and a Master Sergeant Special Forces ran up to me as the bird left, and he said, "Sir," he said, "I don't know who you are, but Major Beckwith wants to see you right away." And I said, "Well, which one is he?" And he said, "It's that big guy over there jumping up and down on his hat." So I went over with some trepidation, and he was a very profane man, and he said words to the effect of, you know, who the blankety blank blank are you? And I said, oh, I'm a reporter. And he said, you know, I need everything in the whole damn world. He said, I need ammo, I need medevac, I need food supplies. I would love to have a box of cigars and a bottle of Johnny Walker or Jim Beam. And what has the Army in its wisdom sent me but a godforsaken reporter? He said, I have news for you, boy. I don't need a reporter. I have no vacancy for one, but I am in desperate need of a corner machine gunner, and you're it. And my jaw fell open, and he kind of dragged me over to a bunker and gave me 10 minutes of instruction on the care and feeding of the 30 caliber light air-cooled machine gun and how to clear a jam, and gave me my instructions, which I could shoot the little brown men outside the wire, but not the ones inside the wire because they belong to him. And I should also keep one eye always on the other corner bunker machine gun, because that one was manned by the CIDG, which were South Vietnamese forces. And he said, I don't trust them as far as I can throw you. He said, so if they turn that gun around, take them out.
So this is 1961, and you find yourself in the middle of a war zone in the Ia Drang Valley in 1965. How did you get from point A to point B?
Well, in 1963, I started reading stories from guys like David Halberstam and Neil Sheehan from a place called Saigon. And the more I read, the more I came to feel that there was going to be a war there. It would become America's war. It would be my generation's war, and I wanted to cover it. Lying there at the brigade headquarters, cussing a blue streak, and Colonel Brown, the brigade commander, came out and he said, look, this is probably going to be a long, hot walk in the sun, and you ain't missing anything. If there's anything starts, I'm going out there and you can go ride with me. Well, it started, and he headed for his chopper, and I'm right in his slipstream, and we get aboard and we fly out there. No trouble finding that LZ. The smoke was 5,000 feet in the air and rising. And we circled around, and Hal Moore is waving him off. He's telling him, look, you land that command chopper with all those antennae here, you're going to have to walk home because they'll shoot it up real bad. And while he's talking, we're circling, and while we're circling, I look down, and an A-1E Sky Raider passes below us with 100 yards of fire and smoke streaming from it. And I watched this guy go into the jungle, and they're yelling on the cans, anybody see a shoot, anybody see a shoot. And it was my side of the bird. And I clicked that thing and said, no shoot, no shoot. He rode it into the jungle.
Gosh.
And
that must have been a 51 or something that got him that big bird.
That was Captain McClellan out of Idaho, wife and 5 kids.
Gosh.
He's still in that jungle. The MIA POW folks contacted his widow some years back, probably 10, 15, and said they had a vector on where the plane was, and they were prepared to go in there and do the digging and recapture the remains. And but did she want that? And she, God bless her, said, no, I don't think so. He died doing something that he really loved. He died supporting the troops in a famous battle. So let's just leave him rest there in peace. She said, the Air Force took care of my kids, got every one of them through college, and let's leave him where he is.